لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وآله وأزواجه وذريته أجمعين. I want to talk a bit about types of arguments which are taught in our traditional logic books in Islamic curriculum. And this Sulam al-Munarak is a book which is widely taught in Arab world and also in North Africa, Al-Maghrib al-Islami. But this is not traditionally taught in our Dars Nizami in subcontinent, but I had an occasion to study it with some of the Mauritanian scholars. But the material is the same as in the books which we study. And it's basically its base is Aristotelian logic, although there's some there's some addition as well according to the Islamic context. So I'm going to talk about this type of arguments. And Aqsam al-Hujja can be translated as argument, but it can also be translated in some contexts as evidence. The book is Sulam al-Sulam Munarak في علم المنطق. It's in a poem form. It is in a poem form because it's easier to memorize it. And it was authored by one of the Maliki scholars, Imam Allama Abdurrahman bin Muhammad al-Saghir al-Akhdari al-Jazairi. It's from Al-Jazair. Oh, it's not the modern Al-Jazair, but from those areas. Rahimahullah ta'ala, he has other books which are taught in, for example, in Maliki fiqh. He has a very influential book, which is one of the first books which you study in Maliki fiqh. I think it's called Matnul Akhdari. I had an occasion to study that as well with some scholars. So, okay, so this is at the end of the book, at the end of the poem, he talks about types of Aqsam al-Hujja. Aqsam al-Hujja. Types of argument. And and he sort of grades them according to their strength. So types of arguments and their grading according to their strength of the argument. And we look at arguments from, and as I said, in some contexts, al-Hujja can be translated as evidence as well. But the better word for that is normally ad-Dalil. And al-Hujja Jama is a Hijaj. That's for argument. or qiyas. And you can look at arguments, as we know, arguments from two aspects, two essential aspects, as to their material, their subject matter, what they're talking about, content, and as to their form. So that's why we have formal arguments and informal argument, because some arguments are true just because of their form. So, and it doesn't matter what you put in them, as long as it is in certain forms, then you would have a sound conclusion. So we differentiate between the content of an argument and the form of argument. Similarly, we can differentiate between the content of a statement and its form, for example. So this division or أقسام of arguments here is from the viewpoint of content and their types according to their, as per their content, and not so we'll just ignore their form as far as this division is concerned. Okay, so we are looking at the types of argument. There are different types as far as their subject matter is concerned, or the content is content of this argument, and then we'll see how different types of arguments can be graded as to their strength as far as their subject matter is concerned. Okay, so we're going to look at that. So this is the text of the, so وحجة نقلية عقلية وحجة نقلية عقلية أقسام هذه خمسة جلية. The first division is between two types of arguments. So this is the text. حجة نقلي and عقلي. And this is one of the commentaries by Hujja, we mean Qiyas. That's argument. Solely with جهة الخطأ, so as to مادة, the subject matter and form, they are في جهة الخطأ في الكاس كما يأتي في قول سبقته البرهان إلى آخره يحتاج إلى بيان مادته. As to the content of, there are two types here. As to the content of the arguments are of two types, naqli and aqli. Okay, let's look at these. النقلي is the one هو ما كانت مادته مأخوذة من الكتاب والسنة والإجماع وعقلي وأقسامه خمسة. Okay. So the argument, the first broad distinction or division of arguments, or al-hijaj or al-hujja. There are two types of arguments: naqliya, aqliya. Rational arguments and transmitted argument may be or in English sometimes I would say argument based on authority. Obviously, legitimate authority in that concept. So, as to their subject matter, you draw subject matter either from aql, reason, and by reason we here mean reason in broad sense. So that includes senses as well as understanding and reason in a broader sense. And on authority, obviously in authority we are also using reason, but just to understand it, what the authority is saying, but we are not actually drawing the subject matter from reason. We are getting subject matter from the authority. And the arguments based on authority I studied in Usul al-Fiqh, one of major Islamic discipline, and those arguments as to their subject matter, which are based on authorities, are three basically: Kitab, the book, which is the Quran, to the Sunnah of the Prophet, and three, Ijma, the consensus of the scholars, Muslim scholars, consensus based on their knowledge and expertise. Now, there are two things which we should remember when we are saying these are based on authority. And one I already mentioned, but there's another one which is normally ignored. So, argument based on authority, which authority is not a good word in the context of modern civilization, but anyway, argument based on authority or naql. I think I should try to find out in translation if there is any other appropriate word, English word they use, naql. So there are three: the book, the Sunnah of the Prophet, and three, consensus. Obviously, among the sources, there is the fourth one, which is qiyas, but that's not naql. Sources of usul fiqh, but that's not naqli. That's also aqli. Now, the thing is, firstly, you understand both the Sunnah and in order to understand that, obviously, you need aql, you need reason, just to understand the language and the argument, their argument. So in that sense, they are not naqli. They're naqli in the sense that their source is there. And secondly, and more importantly, the argument might be based on authority, in the sense that the subject matter is derived, or the content is derived from the authority, or is ultimately justified based on authority or referred back to authority, but within the argument itself there might be a rational argument or reasoning. So these are two. So naqli doesn't mean that it doesn't have reason. It simply means that where do you draw the content in the set type. Okay, so that was aside. So our main concern here is the rational arguments. So they are, according to our author, 5 types. Rational arguments as to their subject matter are of 5 types: khataba, sher, burhan, jadl. And the fifth one is safsada. So khataba, sher, burhan, jadl, and safsada. I'll try to translate their meaning in a minute, but this sequence is not as to how strong, as to their strength, because it's trying to present them in a poetry form, so he has the limited space for maneuvering. But we'll see what their gradation is as to their strength in a minute. So there are 5 types. And his sequences in poetry: al-khitaba, we can see speech. Number 2, shir, poetry. Number 3, al-jadl, polemics or dialectics. And the 4th one is, in his sequence, al-burhan. This al-burhan is sound argument. Sound formal argument is called al-burhan. So not just because in Aristotelian logic you differentiate between sound argument and what's the other one? I just can't recall it at the moment, but you can divide a formal Aristotelian type argument into sound argument and probably sound and unsound, and a strong and weak argument. So a strong argument is the argument which is formally true, but its content might be false, for example. A weak argument is the argument which is formally, it has formal defect. The sound argument, on the other hand, is the argument which is formally strong and it has true content as well. So that's al-burhan generally. Okay, and the 5th one is a safsata, which is sophistry. Or sophistical argument, the argument which seems strong and sound, but it is actually unsound and weak. So these are 5 types. But as to their strength, the first one is obviously Al-Burhan. According to our author, sound argument. And the second one is Al-Khitaba. We'll go through each of them to see which one are, why they are not strong. Speech or oratory, probably not. Speech, speech is better because it's not just oratory. And the third one is Al-Jadal, polemics. The fourth one is poetry, and fifth one is sophistry. So sophistry is the weakest because obviously it's an unsound, it's a fallacious argument, so it's the weakest. It means all the other. So this is the strongest because it is form and content both top notch. Both. Say this is will give you absolute certainty if you have, because it's in Al-Burhan the inference is correct and the content is true. In the other one there would be certain weakness from one point of view or the other. The second one is Al-Khitaba, the third one is Al-Jadal, and the fourth one is Ash-Shi'r, that is poetry, and the fifth one is obviously the weakest, sophistry. Okay, I think we'll just stop here today, and next time inshallah we'll look at each of them one by one. Even though Al-Burhan I already explained it a bit why it is the strongest, but we'll go through all 5 of them in the next session to see why they are considered in this hierarchy as to the strength of the argument. Okay.